Hello, my soul brothers and sisters. My name is Vas Solo. I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic, a practicing yogi, and a certified meditation coach. And I wanted to make one more video before this year ends to share with you what I'm most grateful for. And it's not going to be something corny like I'm grateful for my pumpkin spice latte every morning. It's going to be something fairly significant, and that might surprise you. So stick around for the rest of the video to find out what that is. The holidays could be a pretty difficult time for most people, not just those of us who are going through an addiction, but those of us who are going through an addiction. They could be extremely difficult. For me, they were an opportunity to overindulge because I didn't have to go into work on some of the days, and so that means I could go on several days of binging without necessarily having to call in sick or disappoint people. But at the same time, it was an opportunity for me to really ruin myself. And in those moments where I'd be waking up with that severe hangover, there was a lot of time to really reflect and to beat myself up about what I was doing with my life or what I was not doing with my life. And so it's interesting because during that time, I had no idea that what I was going through was actually going to be the most significant thing in my life and the thing that I would be most grateful for. So yes, my addiction is the thing that I'm most grateful for. Now, to those of you who are still going through it or who are in early recovery, that might seem counterintuitive or absurd. How can something so negative that causes me so much suffering possibly turn out to be the best thing that would ever happen to me? Well, if you think about it this way, when you're sleeping and you're having a pleasant dream, have you ever tried to wake yourself up from that? Chances are you probably haven't. But on the other hand, when we're having a nightmare, we'll do whatever we can to snap out of it. And so I think you see where I'm going with this. The addiction is what snapped me out of the very nightmare that I was living. And if you've watched my other videos, you've probably started to get a sense that the addiction itself was not necessarily the problem, although it was a problem. The bigger problem in my life was that the whole time that I was growing up, and even in my adult years, or especially in my adult years, I felt like there was something missing from my life. I felt like there was a separation between me, life, and all the people around me. And I didn't know what that was or why that was. And that was probably the most frustrating thing imaginable. I think that if you're an addict, if you do some deep introspection, on some level you can relate to that. And I know that as I was growing up, I tried anything that I could think of to distract myself from that feeling. Whether it was by hanging out with my friends, or of course using drugs, or it was getting another girlfriend, or it was going to college, or it was focusing on my career. I thought all of those things would somehow bring me to that point of finally feeling like I belonged, of finally providing me that sense of peace and satisfaction. And over and over again, I was disappointed. They never did. I had some glimmers of hope, but as soon as I would explore any of those avenues, they always ended up letting me down, because no matter how successful I was at those things, it never satisfied that feeling. It never filled that sense of emptiness. Now, when you go through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where the 12 steps are found, the book talks about those things being dependencies or logs. In other words, things that we rely on, which we think will solve our problem and will give us the happiness that we seek. But like I said, they only end up disappointing us, and they only make us dependent on them without providing any true sense of relief. And I guess I had to go through that. I guess I had to go through all of that suffering, all of that experimenting in order to finally seek out the one thing that I wasn't seeking, and that was spiritual growth. That was a connection to something intangible, invisible. So I can't really blame myself for not seeking it, but I needed to go through that nightmare in order to wake up from that dream, from that horrible, horrible dream, and to finally realize that what I was seeking the whole time, what I was actually looking for inside, that to fill that emptiness with, could only be filled with a spiritual solution. And in order to do that, I had to go into the 12-step program, and I had to work the steps in order to have that experience, because I could not bring it about on my own. Now, had I gone into the 12-step program when I wasn't ready, and I did that 2 years before I actually recovered, the program didn't resonate. I sat and I read the steps, which were posted on a placard in front of me, and I just could not fathom how doing those steps would somehow recover me from this horrible addiction to drugs and alcohol. It didn't make any sense, and so I left and I continued to use for another 2 years. Well, when I was finally ready to completely surrender, to not judge, to have an open mind, I still didn't know how those steps would recover me, but I was willing to give it a try. And you know what? The miracle happened. The miracle happened. Not only did I recover, and the obsession to drink and use drugs was removed, and very quickly, but I also found that that sense of emptiness and that veil was also removed. And suddenly I felt like I was a part of life. You know, I've shared this in meetings before. When we look at those steps, and in the rooms, we call those steps the recipe to make the cake, or the cake recipe. And so the steps are the ingredients to make that cake. Now, if you think about what makes a cake, it's flour, it's eggs, it's sugar, it's milk. When you look at those ingredients separately, they don't look like a cake. You can't picture that that's what would make a cake. But when you put them together and in the right way, they make a delicious cake. And so it's the same thing with the 12-step program. When we do all those steps the way they're meant to be done, it causes this beautiful transformation within us that removes our desire to use drugs and to drink, and actually finally connects us to something deeper within us that gives us everything that we're looking for outside of ourselves. And that's the beauty of the program, and that's the beauty of addiction. That's why I'm so grateful that I went through it, because had I not, I may not have been suffering as much as I was, and things might have been okay on some level, but I would have never been fortunate enough to access this deeper, more meaningful reality, which now pervades everything that I do, and that allows me to feel connected, allows me to form meaningful relationships, and allows me to experience true happiness. So for those of you who are still suffering, my message is, and always was, if you think that you might be an addict, which means that once you start using, you can't stop, or once the obsession comes into your mind, you can't tell yourself that I'm not going to use, then you might be an addict like me. And so the suggestion is to get a sponsor and work the steps, because you never know, it might change your life. Happy holidays. Joy to you.